further. Honestly, let's be real about it. The system of education was created in order to push out factory workers, to push out workers for the system, right? When you look at the assembly line in a factory, look at the classroom, sitting all in a row, right? The bell is ringing. We still got bells in public education. Some are doing away with it, but we still have bells, okay? Making announcements as if you need a reminder that you're transitioning, right? When we look at the mechanical and how robotic and how systematic rather, the school day is coming. You wear a uniform, you look the same, you blend in, you sit at a desk, a hard chair. Yes, we have flexible seating, but not everywhere has that luxury of having flexible seating. You have lunch at a particular time. You have another class at a particular time. So there's not a freedom to move naturally how your body or how your development stage will move. When you look at the system was meant to push out factory workers, and it is still producing people that's going to contribute to society, but not in a creative way, not in a way where you're tapping into the divine qualities of their soul. Secondly, the system of education was meant to indoctrinate immigrants. Read on it, y'all. If it's breaking your heart, I hope it breaks your heart, because the reality is, as one of my friends just shared on the podcast, we're delusional. We come in thinking, teachers, me, we come in thinking that we're going to fix the system, right? We're going to change the world one child at a time. That was my ammo, y'all. Like, that was my whole hope. But then when I came into the system, I realized, oh, there's a lot more to the system that I didn't understand. There was a Hey there, TWT family. Welcome back to another episode of Teachers Who Thrive podcast with yours truly, Dr. Jacynth, Joyce. And today's episode, we're going to be talking about the meaning of education, right? And so I wanted to do this because I do feel, and just from conversations with my guests, but then also my honest experience being in public education for now more than a decade, there were a lot of misconceptions I had around education. There were a lot of things I did not know. It was not until I stepped out of the classroom and I furthered my education, master's in educational administration and a doctorate in educational leadership, that I went on this search of discovery, by default through classes and having to write my dissertation. But there were some things that I uncovered about education that was really disheartening, but also it was very revealing, and it helped to temper my expectations. But now I move through education, what I do, and serving and coaching teachers from a place of maturity, wisdom, but also understanding. So my hope for this episode is that you also gain a higher level of understanding of the system of education, the meaning of education, and why I believe the system of education is very different from the call of a teacher. They should be one and the same, but here in the United States, I don't believe it is, it's in sync. And so I do believe this dissonance creates a level of burnout for teachers, a lot of premature teachers leaving the field of education. And so my hope is that if you're meant to remain in education, you remain. If you're meant to transition out, you transition out, but you leave with a level, or you remain with a level of knowledge that will empower you. And so without further delay, let's get started. So the meaning of education. So while I was studying and working on my dissertation, at the state level, I was a part of New Jersey Education Association. I was a statewide consultant under the Professional Development and Instructional Issues Division. And under that, I became one of the co-founders of the REAL movement, Racial Equity Affirmation Literacy in Schools. And one of my comrades, my brother in this work, so dope, Gabriel Tanglao, bless you. I really appreciate your work. I learned the Latin root. One of the definitions of education, the Latin root, is educare, or educere, however you want to pronounce it. But literally, it means to train. It means to mold, but it also means to draw out the divine qualities of the soul. What? I've never heard that before. I knew education was to teach, to train, just by definition, but this third part of the definition, to draw out the divine qualities of the soul, I can't say that I was focused on that. By faith, I'm a woman of faith, so absolutely, I knew that there was something beyond the physical or the natural of the student, so my faith informed that, but I didn't know that the true definition of education was to draw out the divine qualities of every student's soul that I come in contact with. And so with that understanding of focusing on the divine qualities of the soul, if that is a true definition of education, then when we find ourselves looking at the system of education in the United States and the inception and how it was created decades, centuries ago, we find ourselves in a real problem. How education was standardized and popularized under Horace Mann, which he was considered to be the superintendent of standardized education, as it will. Number one, the truth and the reality. Number one, only white boys, white elite boys, were considered for having access to education. Girls were not included in that inception from the very beginning. It actually says in research they did not believe in female geniuses. Now, when we look at just the inception of education, the system of education, what are two things that we find? Racism, white male elite boys, right? White elite boys. Two, genderism. Female geniuses were not considered. So when you look at the social constructs in society, class is a social construct. You rich, you poor, you middle class, you blue collar, all these collars, white collar, red collar, all these collars, right? We've got class, we've got race, and we have gender. Let's dig a little further. Students of color, people of color were not included in this public education that was standardized in the United States. Let's take it a little further. There's a Supreme Court case, and I don't remember the title of it, but definitely do your research. A Supreme Court case where the Asian population, I do believe they were Chinese American, went before the Supreme Court in hopes and asking and requesting if they could be identified as white so that they can have access to educational privileges like the white students would. Why? That is a huge problem because of the skin or the race or the culture, ethnicity that I was born into. I almost feel like that group of people felt like it was better to forfeit their identity as Asian American to gain privilege, to gain access to school and resources in order to have a better education. That is very contrary to the meaning of education, to train, to draw out the divine qualities of every student's soul. So when we look at segregation, when we look at racism, when we look at genderism, when we look at classism, now we are compartmentalizing. Now we are saying, you are worthy of me paying attention to your soul. You are worthy of having access to this particular class or to this particular level of education. And so that's the harsh reality, but it is very separate. There's some dissonance when it comes to understanding the meaning of education to the system of education that we know it. Let's take it a little further. Honestly, let's be real about it. The system of education was created in order to push out factory workers, to push out workers for the system, right? When you look at the assembly line in a factory, look at the classroom, sitting all in a row, right? The bell is ringing. We still got bells in public education. Some are doing away with it, but we still have bells, okay? Making announcements as if you need a reminder that you're transitioning, right? When we look at the mechanical and how robotic and how systemic systematic rather, the school day is coming. You wear uniform, you look the same, you blend in, you sit at a desk, a hard chair. Yes, we have flexible seating, but not everywhere has that luxury of having flexible seating. You have lunch at a particular time. You have another class at a particular time. So there's not a freedom to move naturally how your body or how your development stage will move when you look at the system was meant to push out factory workers, and it is still producing people that's going to contribute to society, but not in a creative way, not in a way where you're tapping into the divine qualities of their soul. Secondly, the system of education was meant to indoctrinate immigrants. Read on it, y'all. If it's breaking your heart, I hope it breaks your heart, because the reality is, as one of my friends just shared on the podcast, we're delusional. We come in thinking, teachers, me, we come in thinking that we're going to fix the system, right? We're going to change the world one child at a time. That was my ammo, y'all. Like, that was my whole hope. But then when I came into the system, I realized, oh, there's a lot more to the system that I didn't understand. There was a level of naivete, a level of innocence. And so I do believe when people look on the outside of the system, it's like, yeah, it should be easy to change. Yeah, we need to change this, like just implement changes. But the system is so ingrained in the system, in the society, or in the system of education in the United States, that some of this is very hard to uproot, to rebuild and start over. There's something so powerful, even when we think of abolitionist teaching, right? And abolitionist teaching speaks to, racism and having to do away with racist beliefs or racist teaching, or even teaching only from the dominant perspective of white Americans. But I do think there's some things that need to be abolished in our system in order for us to get to the true meaning of education, which is drawing out the divine qualities of every student's soul. So it was for pushing out factory workers, number one. It was number two, indoctrinating immigrants. They did not believe that immigrants understood the way of life in the United States. Immigrants were second-class citizens. They were not looked upon as equal or valuable or even worthy. And so how about it that when they come into schools, we indoctrinate them, right? The system of education, if you want to think about it, it's a system of indoctrination. And there are many people, and the next episode that I'll talk about is the true call of teaching. I don't believe the system of education and the call of teaching is one and the same. Fortunately, they're operating very differently. And I do believe that's why teachers experience burnout, compassion fatigue, and even exit the field of education, because they find out that the system of education and the call of teaching is completely different. They should actually support each other. They should actually complement each other. But what I'm finding, along with experience in education, with my research in education, they're not one and the same. And I do believe teachers are in a state of friction, in a state of frustration, because we believe that the system of education and the call of teaching and what we do every single day would actually be a healthy and be a very successful marriage. Absolutely not. And so I do believe we're operating from a place of frustration because we are confusing the system of education with the call or the power of teaching. Now, yes, I do believe that all the system is here and the system exists and is created the way it has been created from inception. I do believe the power and the call of teaching may not be able to override the system, but it'll be able to make changes within the system. So the people that we serve, our clients, our students, will be better because they came in contact with teaching us as a teacher versus being victims of the system. Are we there yet on a national, international level? I don't believe it. Are we getting there? My hope with this podcast is that we do. And so let's break down what it means to train, right? And I got 5 more minutes with y'all. I want these to be like very power-packed 15-minute sessions, just kind of unpacking the truth and the power of some things, because I do believe knowledge gives us power, but I do believe some of us as teachers or educators are not in the know. We're naive about a lot of certain things, and we're moving through our day-to-day stuck, surviving, because we lack knowledge, but then we also lack the tools how to move from surviving to thriving, from isolation to community, from lack of information, which can be seen as poverty, to being wealthy in health, being wealthy in mindset, and being healthy and wealthy in our spirits and in our souls. So let's look at the word train, right? And so I went to the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, because again, the Latin root of the word education, educare, one of the definition is to train. So let's talk about what it means to train. It is to teach a person or an animal a particular skill or type of behavior through practice and instruction over a period of time. Is the system of education doing that? Yes, right? Lessons that we teach every single day. It's given instruction. We're giving our students practice to master or grow in a particular skill over a period of time. Over the 180 days that we have our student, our goal, teaching our particular content, is that they would become experts or masters, right? Or if they were novices in the beginning, they're becoming apprentices, or they're growing in their learning, that they master a particular skill before they leave us. And that's why we have the state assessment. That's why we have checks for understanding. That's why we have common assessments. That's why we have quarterly assessments to check on how well are they doing with that particular skill, or when we say that particular standard. But the issue with that is that we put content to be primary and the soul work of education to be secondary. But what if we flipped it, where we're training and we're teaching not the skill of just a particular content, not a skill of a particular a standard, but what if it's a skill that would better them when they go out into society? What if the skill of communication? What if the skill of relationship building? What if it's the skill of introspection? What if it's the ability for them to engage with people that don't look like them, don't believe like them, don't think like them, come from a different part of the world? How are we preparing them and training them to be able to engage with people that are different from them and still be successful? Or are we perpetuating an issue of isolation because the system is so boxed in? We have to teach a particular standard, a particular day. Stick within your content, stick within these books. Don't color outside of the lines that we're teaching them. But our teaching is limited, it is fragmented, and it is missing the truest part of what education really is, and that is to draw out the divine qualities of each student's soul. Now let's look at that soul part, right? We know that soul is the emotion, the will, and the mind of every individual person. And it seems also to be considered the immaterial part. It's that immortal part of a particular person. It's the spiritual part of a human being regarded as immortal. Are we teaching to the souls of our students? Nah, I can tell you we're not. Do we see them as a complex beings, not just mind, but do we tap into their emotions and their will? Do we let them know that they have power beyond their current circumstance? Do we let them know that they have power beyond their feelings? Are we tapping into the emotional part of teaching? Now we have social emotional learning that is now beginning to uncover that social emotional part is so important for students. But I'm looking over a pattern and a trend of decades and centuries. Holistically, the system of education, have we been training them beyond the content, beyond the job in the future, beyond indoctrinating to a system and a culture that we want them to fit in and assimilate? Are we speaking to their emotions, their will, and their mind, that they believe once they leave our presence, once they leave us for the summer, that they feel more empowered because they came in contact with us than disempowered, right? And so that's what I want to touch on for this particular episode is, one, the meaning of education, two, the difference between the system of education and the power and the call of teaching, or the power and the call of a teacher. They're not one and the same. And how do we remedy that dissonance? How do we close that gap? Well, we'll just have to wait and see for our next episode. So thank y'all for tuning in to TWT Podcast with yours truly, Dr. Jacynth Joyce. And I just want to encourage y'all again, you were not created to survive. You were born to thrive. Until next time.